Jack Heritage, practical karate instructor from the Cotswolds.
And I am Pat Woodward, amateur enthusiast and practitioner in a number of different martial arts styles.
And welcome to the Armchair Combatives podcast. Hello guys, welcome back.
Very nice to be here for the season finale. We've got an absolutely incredible special guest lined up for you today. Jack, would you like to lead in the man himself?
Oh, I think it's about time. So, we've got a very exciting international star on the podcast today. We're very excited to introduce. This person has been very, very active on the YouTube space for the last, I'm not even going to guess how many years. It's been a long time, I think. It's been a longer time than I can imagine. This is the amazing Rokas Leo of the USDC Championship. So, can you introduce yourself, Rokas?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the generous introduction. I appreciate the kind words. You're right, I've been on YouTube for a while now. I'd probably have to look at the numbers myself, but I think it's close to 10 years, which is crazy, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. It includes me starting as a professional Aikido instructor, where I was running a full-time Aikido dojo. Then I started my YouTube channel making tutorials for my students and creating all sorts of Aikido content. It became one of the biggest Aikido channels in the world. But then I was upset that people are putting way too much faith in the Aikido techniques than I believed they should. I became skeptical of some of the techniques myself. And I decided to pressure test Aikido on the record, on a video against an MMA fighter, which was the first big viral video that just became viral without me expecting it. And that led me on a different path where I started realizing that even though I showed that my Aikido skills didn't work, there's a lot of people who still had doubts, and they blamed me, and they said, oh, it's your Aikido which doesn't work. It's not Aikido, period. And I'm not saying I was the best Aikido practitioner, but I was concerned that people are not admitting the truth. So I started digging deeper into that subject, exploring what's real and what's not real in martial arts. And eventually that led me to quit Aikido, close my dojo. I went on to train as a MMA fighter, fought in the cage, documented that journey on my channel, and then continued the line of questioning martial arts. And eventually I came up with the concept of what's now known as USDC, or the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship, where I take various martial arts experts from across the whole globe and put them in realistic self-defense scenarios, and we test to see what works and what doesn't work from their end. So it's kind of a bigger extension of my own personal journey.
That's awesome. I'm glad you did a proper intro, because we know enough about you. We've obviously been following your work for a fair few years now, but it's much better coming from you than it is coming from us. And to be quite honest, I've been following the USDC pretty much since season 1. I remember when it first came out, and I thought this is really cool. I love the kind of like the way that it was just kind of like just thrown in your face, like this is real. There's no obviously it's a show. It's supposed to be entertaining, but the thing that I loved about it the most was it was just cut through the bullshit, and that was what I really took away from the season, especially when Shank Tank first came out. I remember watching that episode. I remember watching it and thinking specifically, like, oh my god, like the amount of knife defense you see online, and then this is basically just blowing out of the park saying, no, right, okay, this doesn't work. Okay, you can try and make it work, but you're probably going to get, I think what was the maximum, something like 47 or something like that, 47 stabs in. It was just ridiculous, right? For me, I think the interesting thing about the running of the show is the impact that it has on other people watching it, and the impact especially on martial artists watching it that think they train a self-defense system, but don't actually train a self-defense system. So I was going to ask you, Rokas, what were the kind of the biggest things from running the show? What were the biggest things that you noticed impacted the way in which you approach like self-defense differently?
Yeah. So USDC didn't shock me personally that much. I mean, in season 1, I was actually a director/contestant. So I intentionally had a lack of information. I only revealed parts of the scenarios to myself, so it would be fair competition. Not that I was expecting to win. I was the underdog in season 1. But I tested myself, putting myself in those scenarios. And I was quite realistic on what I'm going to expect, because for a lot of people, I already pressure tested my martial art quite a bit. I did a bunch of self-defense systems, went through like certification courses, just searching for truth, searching for what really works. And when I went on to USDC, which for some could be a big eye revealer, it's like you expect your knife defense techniques to work and then nothing works at all, or you expect your martial art to work and then use completely different things. I'm going to give a bit of a small spoiler for the women's season, the spin-off show. We have a judo black belt for the first time in USDC, and there's way more striking than we all expected, and that is to say that that particular judo black belt never did any striking in their lives. So things go down not the way you expected, especially if you pressure test things in a different environment for the first time. For me, that was not a shock. It was more or less how I expected. Some things worked, some things didn't. A lot of things didn't work. Again, that's kind of what I expected. And the same applied to me observing the other contestants. Maybe there was a little bit of a greater number of being stabbed in the shank tank than I expected. Like you mentioned, I think you're somewhat accurate about 46 times. I thought maybe 20, 30 would be enough. But even still, I expected a lot. It was a lot. For me, it's more about showing that to the others, and because there's so much misconception, we all have big egos. Usually in martial arts, it's an individualistic sport or practice, so a lot of people tend to come there wanting to become the best, wanting to beat others, and it's easier to follow a martial art and a practice where you're not challenged, and I'm talking mostly about traditional martial arts. You're challenged in some ways, like you need to learn techniques, you need to learn to bow and to know the etiquette and the forms, but eventually you kind of catch on, you know what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do, and you become the top dog, and you're like, I know how this works. And even self-defense systems, they're guilty of that as well. Many self-defense systems, not all. They come in and they do their knife defense drill that they were taught, and they think like, I do this drill so well, and they never really take that extra step of really pressure testing their stuff. So this could be honestly deadly. You know, if you trust in your skills and you think you're a superhero, you come into a situation and you try to apply it in a real situation, and you try to apply that and it doesn't work, you're going to have a bad day. So my hopes with USDC is to open the eyes of the viewers who have those delusions, who have those ideas, or even just slight misunderstandings, so they would look at it and they would think, oh my God. And this is what Shank Tank definitely did. They were looking at the comments. I do read quite a bit of the comments to get a perspective of how people respond and what they're thinking. And there were a lot of comments like, oh my God, knife defense is way harder than I thought. So, and I'm very happy when that does that. So for me, it's not as much about me changing my approach, because I already went through years of doing that and questioning martial arts, combat sports, self-defense, trying different systems, pressure testing. So for me, USDC wasn't a big game changer in my mind, but I feel it was a somewhat of a game changer in the martial arts space.
That's really interesting to hear, because obviously I pride myself on having done a number of knife-based martial arts before, and it's obviously really easy to go through your nice forms, your nice easy, patterns and flow back and forth. But something that even in knife-centric martial arts you rarely see is pressure testing. And I suppose my sort of unpopular opinion around the subject is there's almost no way to accurately pressure test knife defense, because there's no such thing as real enough without actually causing harm to your students, to your training partners, and that kind of thing. How has your kind of ethos around pressure testing evolved? Have you kind of looked into different kinds of protective gear? Have you kind of moved away from that sort of thing? Is it more a case of, like, because I know in a USDC you utilize the environment very well. Obviously the shank tank, the whole idea was it was an enclosed space with these kind of barricades and blocks in the way. You obviously utilize the complex in multiple different ways through the challenges and the seasons. So how has your methods of pressure testing kind of evolved, and what are some of the revelations you think would be useful for kind of modern day teachers and the kind of practitioners looking to pressure test the specific art that they're doing?
Yeah, so the safety gear is a bit of a controversy of USDC, but I also would dare call it necessary evil. And personally, I wouldn't even call it evil, to be honest, but some could, because it's a necessity because, as you said, people would get hurt. If we would go full out, and especially at the intensity we go at in the Shank Tank, punches are flying, kicks are flying, and it's everyone's smart, and I tend to bring together a good group of people so nobody goes completely wild. But again, punches are thrown, kicks are kicked, and there's a lot of grappling and a lot of intensity. If there were no helmets, we would start seeing knockouts, and even more specifically, like you're wielding, it's a plastic knife, but it's still pointy. You're endangering your eyes, endangering your face. We don't want that. So the helmets with full visors are very important for the show. Plus, you need to take into account we're putting these guys, the contestants, through 5 or 6 days of constant pressure testing, of constant intense action, usually around 2 challenges per day. And so we need to make sure that they are capable and healthy enough by the end of the show, and they don't fall apart and they don't get injured. And same with the attackers. The attackers, they need to attack 6 or 8 guys in a row again and again. We're talking about like UFC fighters, kickboxing world champions, sumo champions. These guys are top notch, and you have to throw attackers at them who are going to get constantly punished. So the punishment happens, but thick gloves, full visor helmets, they actually reduce the impact a lot. Not entirely. You can still get knocked out in it, but it helps a lot. It changes everything, and it gives us the possibility to go for 5 days and not risk anyone, because again, safety for me is super important. People who are joining the show, they're not getting paid tens of thousands of dollars. It's not in our budget. And they're taking a risk. So there's no reason, like when you fight in a UFC fight, there's a lot of complaints about low pay, etc. But even still, you're getting paid 5-10 grand. If you're a high profile fighter, you get paid more. So you're risking a lot, but you're also getting something back. Here, we're kind of more like, let's freaking do this. And you're still putting a lot on the line, even though you're not getting paid. So again, safety is just, can't stress how important that is. At the same time, what you mentioned, Pat, it's true that it does create a bit of a distance between the full reality and training. But I dare say that we're still going as close as possible without making it extremely dangerous. Most schools never take that step. I mean, we're talking about an attacker who's really trying to get you with that plastic knife. He's attacking you from all angles. He's adding strikes. He's adding kicks, throws. So that person is really, really trying to get the so-called good guys. And again, most people never get to that level, but that's to a big degree how a real person may be. And with the safety gear, of course, you're safer. You don't get as much impact. You're not getting cut. You're not bleeding out. Things are not becoming slippery because of blood going all over the place. I mean, we could imitate that, but I don't want to get canceled on YouTube. But of course, there's some elements you're not getting, but you're getting so much, and you're getting it for an extended time, again and again and again. Whereas, again, most self-defense situations, from my general knowledge, they last a fairly short time. And here you're forced to continue fighting through that pressure, trying different things, and defeating the other person with safety gear, which is harder to knock them out or to cause damage. So I'd argue that that also gives you a certain advantage, because now if you're able to deal fairly well with, we're again talking not only about a person in protection, but we're also talking about experienced guys. Usually my attackers, I'm trying to downgrade them. It's been a common request. I'm doing my best to fulfill that, to get the attackers who are not world champions. But in season 3, those guys were like elite fighters, the attackers, the bad guys. And so you have to deal with these guys. A regular person is still super dangerous. People, they undervalue and underappreciate how dangerous any person can be, especially if you give them a knife, how unpredictable it is, how chaotic it's going to be still. But if you're able to deal against a guy who's super athletic, very coordinated, and he has a knife, and you're going with that person for 30 seconds, even with protective gear, I, again, would argue that that gives you a huge advantage over if somebody attacks you in reality, who's maybe punched in the head maybe once and be like, oh my god, I don't want that, versus these guys, again, they're just gonna keep going. In some cases, you may get people who will get going and they may be on drugs, etc. Self-defense is so complicated, we could always talk about ifs, buts, etc. But my point is, we're getting things as close as we can realistically, and in one way you could argue that it even gives an advantage because that simulation is super intense for a long time, and doing damage is harder than in reality.
Yeah, honestly, I couldn't agree more. Like we're quite big on making sure pressure testing is a part of everything we do at the school that I run, and it's one of those things. Like, I think one of the biggest challenges that I've found is that I think there's what people think self-defense training is, and then there's what self-defense training actually is. And I think a lot of people, when they come into any martial arts school, they just assume they're learning self-defense, which is the first thing. They just make an assumption that Taekwondo equals self-defense or karate equals self-defense, right? And you see this all the time. But one of the other things is that even if you're going to a school that's doing self-defense drills and self-defense principles, you often find that it, like you say, never gets pressure tested. But people don't often expect it to be pressure tested. They expect, I'll just learn a couple of tricks and then I can look after myself. And I think the shift that you talk about, like, there needs to be more light shed onto those kind of elements of self-defense. Like, one of the big things that I think is really important is teaching people problem-solving skills. And problem-solving skills happen under pressure. They don't happen in drilling format. Like, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot recently is kind of like the process in which we take to train, and I think like we tend to look at it as like compliant drilling is like the first step. It's like you need to understand what to do, then you can kind of take that into like more of a like maybe an objective drill, so that there's a little bit more to it, and then obviously you've got the full pressure testing and the sparring. But I think when you get people that are just looking for self-defense courses and stuff, it's really difficult to teach that stuff in the space of like a 4-hour seminar or a 5-hour seminar and get people live training straight away. There's ways in which you can get people doing basic problem solving and basic boundary setting and stuff along those lines, but as soon as it comes to the physical skills, there is like a prerequisite of stuff they need to know before you can just jump straight in and say, right, let's do this live. As I'm sure you find with the show, like, you've got people in there that are like, they're competent fighters. They're competent people. They know how to move, they know how to hit, they know how to grapple. But as soon as they get under pressure, there's still that level of, oh my god, things are changing now, and the things that I thought I knew are not actually as applicable as I originally thought they were. And I think that the thing for me is that I think the separation between self-defense and martial arts is kind of key for a lot of people to begin to understand, because there's some fantastic principles that we can learn from like out fighting another martial artist, but it's not going to replicate the violence that you see in self-defense. And pressure testing, I think a lot of people, from my experience at least, people think pressure testing is just sparring. It's just making sure, as long as we do a bit of sparring in sessions, we're pressure testing. But you're pressure testing for sparring, you're not pressure testing for self-defense. And that's the big difference, right? Consensual violence versus non-consensual violence. There's a big difference.
100%. Forgive me if this is kind of perhaps asking how kind of peek behind the curtain, but with your assailants, the kind of guys you have obviously attacking your contestants, is there ever any sort of mandate for, think about this in a sort of logical context, if you were somebody trying to, if it was enacting a mugging or something like that, or maybe one of the bar fight sequences of somebody starting on your back, is there ever a mandate of, if you personally don't feel like you could win this engagement, you're able to pull back? Or is the mandate always, no, the objective is to put this guy under pressure, so no matter what he does, or she does, as the new season has proved, is it just a case of just keep putting pressure on them no matter how you're feeling, no matter how beaten up you're getting?
It all depends. Every scenario is individual. We discuss and prep for each scenario quite a bit, and again, we take each scenario separately. So it also depends on the challenge itself. So, for example, the challenge now known as the surprise attack, where the contestant has a hood on, and as soon as we take off the hood, they need to respond to the situation that's happening. we make it clear that this will be mostly physical. You may try to use de-escalation, or as Master Ken would use re-escalation, but you may try to use de-escalation, but expect for things to go physical. So that's kind of the goal. We want to put them under real serious physical pressure and see how they respond, which is an important part. It's a surprise. That's the meaning of surprise attack. You're walking and suddenly somebody hits you out of nowhere. It's not necessarily like it happens to everyone all the time, but it can, and it's more what we're testing. But even in the surprise attack scenario on season 3, we had the baby mugger, where the bad guy's like, hey, can I see your baby? Can I touch your baby? And we had a couple of moments where we made it very clear. And by the way, the famous Roberto was playing that dude. And we told him, you're not super committed. Like, if they start striking you and you feel like they're going heavy, or like you can go back and be like, oh, okay, I don't want this. He's not looking for a fight. He wants to grab the baby and run. And a couple of guys hit him hard, and he was like, okay, I'm done. Like, there was a spinning back kick with the baby, also a famous scene by Vilius, the Kudo guy. Gabriel Varga got him a good hook. So that was the setup and the premise of that specific scenario. But then in other cases, you have like 2 versus 1, where it's like, okay, your job is to destroy this guy. And Shank Tank is the top level of that. It's like, no matter what happens, you're there to destroy that person. But at the same time, you have other scenarios where there's much more de-escalation, there's much less commitment. So again, it all depends. It all depends.
Yeah, I think that's really important though, that you make sure that there is distinctions in every scenario, because if every single scenario you did in the USDC always ended up in like super high level violence, I could argue that wouldn't be an accurate representation of self-defense, right? Because there are situations in which you can de-escalate, and to be quite honest, that's probably the most common thing to do, right? Like, when we look at the general things that happen in your life, the most common thing that kind of happens is that you have like an altercation with somebody that's kind of like, you bumped into me, you did this, you did this. 9 times out of 10, that can be solved by just simple as, oh, I'm really sorry, mate. Let me just get you a new drink. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to do it. I'm a bit of an idiot. I've had one too many myself. I bumped into you, and you talk your way out of it. It's probably less likely that it actually does always jump to 10 and jump to violence. But obviously, we don't really take those into account because we just see that as communication, right? So it's one of those things where I think it's really important that you show those nuances of different things. And talking of nuance, this is my little segue into some of the things you've already mentioned about season 4. Is obviously women's self-defense differs massively from male violence in terms of the demographic of attacker, the types of violence that women experience and types of assaults that women experience. So obviously, when you were compiling the stuff for season 4 and how you would approach it, it'd be really interesting to get a bit of an insight, without obviously spoiling the season and telling us exactly what happened, because obviously we want the viewers to just jump on and watch it, because they'll get a lot out of it. But
it's worth just very briefly saying that obviously, with Rokas' permission, we will be posting links to every season of the USDC with this episode. Please don't take any indication there'll be spoilers or anything like that. If you want to engage with Rokas' content, we heartily recommend you go and watch it for yourself. It's incredible content. But Jack does make a very valid point. With it being a women's only season, what were some of the challenges you faced in kind of tailoring the scenarios? What new scenarios did you have to bring in? And did you face any controversy with going from a male-only cast to a female-only cast?
Yeah, actually, to start that off, first distinction I would like to make, there's actually a separation between Season 4 and what we call VSDC, the Women's Self-Defense Championship. There's been already a little bit of criticism. It's like, so the men's is the ultimate and the women's is women's? So when I say it in the show, out of respect of that equality, I always say the ultimate women's self-defense championship, but just out of branding perspective, Ultimate Women's Self-Defense Championship, the USDC. It's a bit of a mouthful, and it's important to keep a certain level of simplicity for communication, so putting that on record. But I'm filming with my team 2 separate seasons this year. So the women's season was filmed already, and we refer to it as VSDC. And season 4, we're filming it next month in Czech Republic with an all-male cast. So there's going to be 2 seasons this year, and they're actually both separate things. So season 4 is not actually the women's season. The women's season, it's considered to be a spin-off. So having made that distinction, again, it was filmed. I think it was amazing. We had a lot of exceptional moments, really great contestants, participants. We had 4 of them, so it's a bit of a smaller season as a tryout because there was way more backlash and controversy around it than I expected. Initially, the plan was that season 4 is going to be all female, and I announced it just before Christmas with a lot of enthusiasm, and I'm all happy, like, yes, let's celebrate. It's going to be a new thing, and it's so important to do. And again, this was like Christmas Eve, I believe. I thought it's going to be a nice, special holiday announcement. And I'm looking at my phone, and every second comment is going, what is this shit? Why are you doing this? I'm not going to watch it. This is going to be boring. This is a bad idea. Granted, there were some positive comments, but majority of comments, or at least half, maybe more, were skeptical and not supportive. And some of them were worried. Not everyone was just a dick about it. Some of them were saying, oh, I just think it's not going to work, and I'm worried that, this is going to destroy the show. The argument was from those people that women's sports are less interesting than men's sport. I'm pretty sure that's true in terms of numbers. Way less people watch women's sports, and they're not as popular. And the concern among the kind of semi-supportive people was that it's going to flop because of that. Now, my personal feeling is it's not entirely apples to apples, whereas it's not a sport. Self-defense is not a sport. And yes, we make USDC entertaining to some degree. We make it fun because I want it, if it's going to be all serious and all kind of the dark side of self-defense, which there's a lot of, very few people are going to watch it. And I want as many people to watch it so that they would benefit from what the show can give them. So it's important for me to have an element of entertainment. And so there's also, it's a championship. So I guess there's a bit of a sports element to it. But also we're talking about self-defense, which is not a sport. It's a life or death situation, which can happen to any person at any time of their lives. And there's a huge educational aspect. And women being attacked, now I was given some criticism. I had this notion that women there's more chance that women are going to get attacked. Some people argue that statistically men get attacked physically more, but then I did some digging in, and men get attacked, maybe in the street by a mugger. So we're talking about and again, women do as well, but I wouldn't be surprised that men get into more fights or they get physically assaulted more. But we're talking sexual violence, we're talking about harassment, we're talking about domestic abuse. I am pretty sure women have way more of that to face, and we would talk about our own psychological kind of relationship with the world. Again, it's my assumption that, and myself being a male, I had fears of being attacked, especially because I grew up in a dangerous city, so I was constantly facing that danger, so it did create a sense of paranoia and fear, which I had to really overcome, and took me a while. But most guys, they don't go around thinking oh, anyone can attack me at any time. Women, from the talks I had with them, from what research I did, and it just makes sense that they have way more of that sense of I'm constantly in danger. There's threats. There's a lot of threats everywhere because men may want to take abuse of them, and it's they're as much as it sucks. Anatomically, biologically, usually men are bigger, they're stronger, so it's a bigger threat again. because, bad guys, they choose their victims and targets, ideally, or in their ideology, they choose people who they think they will defeat. So again, I could talk about this forever, but my point is, it's a huge, huge and relevant subject for women. So it initially just didn't make sense to me. It's like, okay, well, you're comparing women's basketball with the women's self-defense championship. It's not the same. There's parallels, but it's not the same. But again, it also created a sense of concern in me, because this is my business. This is how a big portion of how I make my finances. And usually I do one show per year, so it's a big investment. If I invest a lot of time, energy, finances, and it doesn't work out, yes, to some degree, I get into trouble, because what am I going to do then? But that's where the controversy and all the backlash, it made my holidays miserable. The entire time I wasn't enjoying my Christmas Eve. I wasn't enjoying my Christmas. I was just kind of depressed, looking at the phone, reading the comments, and thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? Should I do the show? Should I not do the show? Should I listen to people? Should I take the risk? And eventually, I believe I found a very intense for me solution. I decided to film 2 instead of 1 seasons this year, which I mentioned. Season 4 and a women's spin-off, which is a lot of work for me, a lot of extra investments, but I just could not stop myself from giving it a shot. And because, again, I feel it's such an important subject. This show, the spin-off, could really give a lot of value to women, and I just couldn't stop myself from doing it. It's like, if it fails and I sink with the ship, I might as well sink, giving it a shot, instead of just listening to the haters and not doing it. And again, I feel like what we filmed, we already have some general edits of a few episodes. I think it's incredible. I think it tells a different story, and yeah, I think there's a lot in it. I do believe I didn't touch the question of the difference, but since I talked a lot, Pat, feel free to reestablish your question, and I'll do my best to answer it.
So, well, I think the kind of point I really want to get across is, as you brought up in your previous answer, the fact that the violence that men and women, males and females, however you want to divide it, do face is vastly different. As you say, a lot of men might be concerned about being the victim of a mugging, a bar fight, a street brawl, that kind of thing. Whereas a lot of the violence that women can face is very passive. It can be harassment in the workplace, in the street, in the club. It is often of a sexual nature, which is obviously where you say you go into the sort of darker side of things. I'm reminded of one of the challenges from the first season of USDC, where you had the contestants come into an office they kind of got an HR review, and obviously the interviewer, who was a woman talking to these men, did begin to make kind of unwanted advances, suggestions, that kind of thing, and it was immediately a self-defense scenario of a very non-physical nature, because as much as I'm sure it would have resolved the situation quickly, you can't immediately just start throwing haymakers on your HR rep just because she's making some unwanted advances. So in the spin-off season, was it a case of there was more inference on challenges that involved a lot of the problems that women do face, like stalking, for example, or just unwanted physical contact, unwanted attention, that kind of thing? Did you feel the need to purposefully move away from the very physical aspects that we see in previous seasons of the USDC, or were you kind of more interested in making it, I guess, an even playing field for the sense of showing the difference, I think is probably the way I'll phrase that.
It was a difficult question, and one I obviously thought about. It's like how similar or how different the shows should be, and obviously they had to be similar. It's a different subject. I think I wouldn't use the word that the situations for men and women are vastly different. I think it's a very big word. I think there's a lot of parallels. There's a lot of similarities, but still, yes, women tend to face different situations on more scenarios, but there's also similarities as well. Like, they can get into a mugging situation. Somebody can try to choke them out, and I'm not sure if that's the main. I can't speak for a woman. I'm not sure if that's the main concern they have. But one of the things I did do is I did do some research into what attacks women are most concerned about, like what are their fears. And in one of the challenges, this is what we did. We put it was the surprise attack scenario. So the challenge is the same as in previous seasons, but these were specifically designed attacks on most relevant and most discussed about situations that women into, mostly on a physical level. Now, this wasn't the entirety of it. There's a separate challenge, which is we call scenarios, where we place them in situations like a house party or a specific one. Without giving too many spoilers, there's a showing of your apartment. You're renting an apartment, and somebody comes into the apartment to check the apartment, and the rest, I will leave you to see what happens. But it's a more of a realistic situation with a context where there's a escalation of events. You're meeting the person. There's other people. You don't know if everyone's friendly or if somebody's aggressive, and you need to make decisions, and there's communication. So those two challenges are different and very consciously. But I didn't want to go the way just of, with women we just do stalking scenarios, or with women we just do harassing scenarios. I think it would be unfair both to women and the show itself, the format, and also to the skeptics in a way, because some of the skeptics were worried and saying like, you're going to take it easy on them and you're just going to give them an easy time and it's not going to be fair. So I think it's a valid concern. It's something that could be unjustly done. And I wanted to make sure that this could not be said about the women's season. And I do believe I delivered as a producer, as a director. The show opens with surprise attacks, physical attacks. And my gosh, the attackers did give the ladies a hard time. They were not taking them easy on them. They were smart. They held back to a necessary degree, which is the same that happens in USDC in the regular show, in the regular seasons. But it was not like, you just hit us and we're just going to fall for you. There was none of that. And that was very important for me too, because I do believe in women's capacity to defend themselves, especially with the right training, with the right skill set. And I do believe in testing things and seeing what works and what doesn't work and showing the reality behind self-defense. So I couldn't just put them in scenarios where everyone falls for them. That just would make no sense for the format. So we do have quite a bit of action. The attackers gave them a hard time. I'm not saying that some of the contestants didn't give a hard time to the attackers. This is something you'll have to watch the show and find out. But I also made sure that there would be a mix of everything, that we would go to the physical situations and we would push them physically and mentally, but also that we would look at more everyday situations where they have to problem solve, as Jack said, that cool phrase. But just a quick note, also when I was developing the scenarios, I had some initial ideas, but I also made sure that I contact the main support for this season from a woman's perspective was Amber Huber. She's a well-known self-defense expert from the States, from the Fit to Fight system. And I made sure that I connect with her. I show her all the scenarios. I ask her for her opinion. She gave me some advice. She gave me some tips. We troubleshooted them to make sure that they're relevant to women, that they make sense, that they're realistic. And there was quite a bit of changes made to make sure that these scenarios make sense in that context, instead of me mansplaining and being a guy and being like, I'm going to design the perfect scenarios for women. It's like, it wouldn't make sense. And I wanted to respect that. And Amber was also, by the way, the judge. This is one more interesting thing I can reveal about the season. I decided to try out a new judging system where there's two judges. There was Amber and another judge from Czech Republic, a self-defense expert who works both with men and women. And after every scenario, they would look at what happened and they would give their score from 0 to 10. So it was very interesting to see the results. It was very interesting to see the thought process and how they saw the situations different and what they were looking for. Sometimes they had the exact same score. Sometimes they had vastly different scores. It was very interesting. I believe it's going to be a very interesting kind of a social experiment and kind of a psychological aspect in that regard as well. But yeah, all in all, just answering your question, I wanted to make sure we did a shorter season. There's less episodes, there's less challenges, there's less contestants, but I wanted to be sure that I would touch as many corners and important aspects of women's self-defense as possible during that season.
I'm really glad you've explained that, because I think this is the thing. Like you say, you have a lot of people in the comments getting all pissy about, oh, well, it's different, or it's this, or it's not going to work, da, 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 da. But just, hearing you talk about it, like, it's one of those things where I feel like if people can't be sold on that, I don't know what you can do. It's one of those things where we notice it all the time, right? There's a lot of misogyny in the martial arts in certain regards. And also, there's also a lot of male self-defense instructors that are very problematic, may I say the least. So it's one of those things where I love the fact that you went out of your way to work with obviously a female judge for this, and somebody that's incredibly well recognised in this field, because just like you say, like, you don't want to be like kind of seen as like, hey, look, it's Rokas now doing like a mansplained version of the USDC, because it's obviously it's not the way that we as men should be approaching women's self-defense anyway. Like, I think it's very important that men are active within women's self-defense to know that we are allies to the cause. But it's also like, we don't want to come in going, actually, we're doing it this way, right? Fuck you guys, because it's just a complete wrong way of approaching it. So I think it's really interesting that the backlash was even a thing in the first place. But it just goes to show how skewed a lot of this stuff still is in favour of men doing things, and it's going to be a man season, and we only want to watch male sports and all that stuff. So it's a really interesting that people are so vocal about it straight away, even just from an announcement. You know what I mean?
I'd be interested in a weird way to hear how many of those comments had a valid reason beyond, I'm not watching this season because it's a women only season. As in, I'm sure it sounds like it was a very difficult time. So I don't want to bring back too many bad memories for you, Rokas, but I think it'd be really interesting to hear how many of these commenters were saying, I don't want to watch this because I'm not sure how fair it will be, or I don't want to watch this because I don't think the scenarios will be appropriate, or I don't want to watch this because it's simply not the kind of high-octane content I'm used to seeing with the USDC. And as Jack said, I wonder how much of it comes down to an unfortunately almost ingrained misogyny in some areas of the martial arts, where it's a case of, no, only big, burly blokes are the people who can do proper martial arts and proper self-defense scenarios. So in terms of you kind of mentioned this was almost a sort of a stealth pilot type thing of, you want to try and put this women's only self-defense season out to then kind of receive, I'm assuming it's just to get it out there to receive the feedback, see how the season's received. Obviously it's probably too early to tell at time of recording, but just based on any initial feedback you've already had and any initial feelings, do you think it would be a case of you might be looking to run 2 seasons now, side by side? Men's self-defense, women's self-defense?
One thing is I learned not to plan too far ahead of myself. I do plan way further than I ever did in my life. In the past, I would plan like a few days ahead of me. Then I learned to plan like a few weeks ahead of me. Now I do plan like a couple of years. It's like, okay, I do this, the next year I do this, and it's just, you grow and it becomes the norm. But I also try not to do that in a strict manner, because things are changing all the time and expectations are not always met. You expect, it's like, it's going to be great, people are going to love this, and I'm going to then make another season of it. You never know. You think it's great, you think people are going to love it, until you release it, you do not know. Personally, so far, I feel it's special what we made, and I see a lot of potential, but it's also, as unfortunate as that is, it's still a business, it's still a economical decision that I need to make. If it flops entirely and it reaches nothing, then I just won't be able to do it anymore. It means, well, it's not time yet. Maybe it's going to be time again later, or maybe it's going to pick up later, and then I will revisit it. But I have some hopes. This is still very kind of unspoken territory usually for me, but there's some things discussed with streaming uh, specifically with placing the current seasons, the existing seasons on some platforms. Who knows? Maybe what works on YouTube, maybe will not work on streaming, or vice versa. Maybe some of the seasons I make will pick up there. Also, which would change the situation. Also, another thing important to note is that making 2 seasons is a lot. It also requires a bigger team. I end up needing to hire people. And if I get enough finances back and I have the money to do it, then it's much more realistic. If the women's season flops, maybe season 4 underperforms, again, it's not enough finances. Like season 4 received significantly less financing from crowdfunding than the previous season for multiple reasons. I think the timing was not good. It was Christmas and people have other things on their mind on Christmas. Plus the views were not on the same level as the previous season, and the views transform. So again, many small reasons, as it's usually the case with this business. But that also limits my cap. I need to make the season successful myself and not rely on external financing. So it all depends. If people love it, I tend to see myself in a way as a servant of people. I try to make things which people enjoy and that gives meaning to them and gives a purpose, but also I try to make things which are relevant for them and they would watch. If people are not going to watch the show, I'm not going to film 2 seasons for myself, just for, no other reason. But ideally, things are going well. People love the shows, and I'll be more than happy to make those seasons. And if it gets back enough, I'll be more than happy to potentially make 2 seasons per year. It's too early to speak, too early to decide. Again, I need facts, I need data, but I'm not saying it's not possible.
I was going to say, I know how busy you were after the filming of season 3. For the viewers that don't know, viewers, we're on a podcast for listeners. For the listeners that don't know, I was lucky enough to actually go over to Lithuania and spend a little bit of time with Rokas. It was pretty much directly after you filmed season 3, and honestly, how busy this man was was absolutely insane. Obviously, all the filming was done, and he was hosting his retreat, which I believe you're doing another one, right? You're doing another retreat this year?
Well, I'm doing 2, actually. The first one, I was very fortunate for that, but the first one got sold out in 3 days, and so I announced a second one back-to-back. So we're doing 2 retreats back-to-back. Plus, I can make this sneaky announcement and say on the record for the first time that I am also planning to announce a women's only retreat. I have no idea if it's going to work, if there's going to be women who will want to join that, but it's going to be a bit of a different format, but similar to the one which I'm conducting now. So yeah, retreats, I'm doing 2, and potentially, again, there's going to be more in the future. So that is correct, yeah.
I think that's really cool, and I obviously I was only lucky enough to do I think I was there for one. We did 1 full day because you were nice enough to let me come over and check it out, and it was so fun. It was so fun, and one of the things that I found, it was just one of those experiences where it was just so nice to be in a space with so many people that are so passionate about what they do that they wanted to travel halfway across the world to be a part of this retreat with, obviously at the time Jeff Chan was teaching and various other people were around during the kind of the seminar day and then the retreat itself, and it was just such an amazing experience. It was just so cool to be able to kind of take part in something that you're actively kind of participating in online. You can then go in person and check out, how do I get on with this? Am I as good as I think I am at the self-defense side of these things? And obviously one of the ones that I was able to do was the basically testing if running away works, which was the kind of abandoned building chase scene, which was it was really good fun. It was really, really good fun. And this kind of links back into something you were saying earlier about the equipment and wearing stuff and obviously making sure safety is a priority. One of the things that I found really, really interesting was Usually, I think my running is pretty good. I think I can run pretty fast. I think I've done enough tactical escape drills that I feel like I understand how to do them relatively well. As soon as you gave me a helmet, I was like, I don't know how to run. I can't see anything. What is going on? This is awful. And I'm pretty sure at one point I decided that it would be a sensible thing to jump down a set of like 10 stairs or whatever. I can't exactly remember, but I just jumped thinking, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Because my brain was just so engrossed in the adrenaline of the moment, and also that kind of like tunnel vision that the helmet like induces. And it surprised me so much, and I really began to feel bad for all of the guys that have to wear those for the entire season, because my God, doesn't it change the dynamic?
Yeah. Well, reflecting to begin with about the retreat, it was very special. Like the group of people that arrived, they're actually still connected on a WhatsApp group. They're every other day they're sending messages to each other, pictures of what they achieved in martial arts, or just even like random things. So a lot of them really became friends. There was a lot of bonding, and I think that's reflective of also what happens in the show. You're going through a bunch of challenges, a bunch of tests. You're already coming with a singular mind, with a similar mindset, and so it's there's a lot of bonding there. You really feel like it's not just you talk and you learn a little bit about each other. You experience things which others will never experience in their lives, and so it creates that bond. So that is very special, and I feel there's a lot of potential to continuing this retreat and giving that unique experience to people. At the same time, also mentioning the busyness, it was absolutely true. Every single moment of the retreat, when I had a free moment, and there were not that many, but whenever I had a free moment, I was actually taking interviews from the contestants, from the judges, from myself. The entire week, throughout the entire retreat, I was backtracking what we didn't have enough time to film in season 3, and I was just constantly interviewing everyone. It was pretty crazy, but yeah, that was my life actually afterwards for a while, just super busy all the time. Not saying I'm not busy now, but that was the peak of it. And with the helmets, yes, pros and cons. As you get with everything, they are distorting the view to some degree, and they limit your breathing as well, because you're breathing into a closed space. Kudo fighters, they wear these helmets all the time, and you can get used to it, and the protection makes it absolutely worth it, but it is an extra challenging level. And I guess, to be fair, you are experiencing adrenaline quite a bit in these challenges, because, as you mentioned, they feel real in some part of your brain, and adrenaline really starts kicking in. But at the same time, I like to add the idea that when you get adrenaline, it does make your vision more narrow. It does distort it a little bit. You're not in your regular mood. And in a way, I like to have this idea that the helmets also add into that. It also adds to that chaos and kind of how just everything feels different, because you still know it's a show. You still don't feel like you feel it's kind of real, but you also know it's not real. And the helmet just adds a little bit of that extra taste of things are really chaotic, and have fun, good luck. Self-defense is going to be kind of similar in a way. So that's how I look at the helmets.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's one of those things, we talk about it a lot, like the adrenaline response and how it changes your body so much during these kind of situations. And this is one of the things that I discovered for myself. I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but one of the first scenario-based self-defense things I did was actually very, very simple. It was basically just like, I want you to do the exact same drill we've just been doing, but we're going to change it for you a little bit, but we're not going to tell you what the change is. And basically all that happened was we just had somebody just hitting the shit out of me from behind while I was trying to do the thing that I was trying to do to the person in front of me. And the idea was to build up that, like, now you're getting this massive spike of adrenaline, and you're going to see the difference in how your body responds to what you were originally trying to do. And obviously what we know about the adrenaline response, we know it changes the motor skills of your body. We know that obviously your complex motor skills, they go out the window. It's not going to happen anymore. It's going to be your gross motor skills, like the simple big movements that are more able to happen. Hence why sometimes when we look at self-defense and stuff and you see all these like really intricate wrist locks and you've got to grab it at exactly 45 degrees precisely and they have to be in this exact position in order to make it work, for self-defense it isn't always applicable unless you've trained it multiple times over years and years and years under that pressure. It's not going to be something you can magically whip out in 2 seconds, right? But I think those kind of understanding the adrenaline response and how it works with self-defense is probably one of the biggest things, like you say, that the pressure testing gives you, and it really does kind of like add into the importance of the show and what the show actually gives the contestants, but more importantly the viewers that are able to kind of see, wow, this is more different than maybe I would have expected.
So, off the back of what Jack has just said, I think the big question I want to ask you while you're here, Rokas, is you've obviously got the business of the USDC going, but more from your own experience running it, organizing it, starring in it, what lessons have you taken to your own personal self-defense teachings from the events and the changes you've witnessed during the progression of the seasons?
So I think there's two different ways I can answer this, and there's one way which is my personal relationship with self-defense, and I kind of started and talked about that at the first stage half of this podcast, whereas I wouldn't say it has been mind-blowing. It was very interesting. I was fascinated. I was interested to see, like, for example, Randy Turner, the Special Forces former soldier. I was like, oh, we see these guys all the time in movies, so how is he perform in reality? And so that was fascinating to me. And we have some other cases where I'm like, oh, I really want to see this. I'm so curious myself, like, to get a judoka in a self-defense situation. We actually, even in VSDC and Season 4, we're adding the addition of hoodies on attackers. So now anyone, and especially judo people, they have something to grab, they have the hood to use. Will they use them? Will they not use them? I will not spoil to you, and you will have to find out by watching the show. But there are these answers which I want to see and get answered. But a lot of times it's still, rarely it's something radical. And it's like, oh my God, this is way beyond my expectations. People surprise me in various ways. It's like, oh, I haven't come up with this idea. Oh my God, that's spinning back kick Natan did in Season 4 Nightclub. That was amazing. But it's not like changing the landscape of my understanding of self-defense. As I mentioned before, I spent a lot of time analyzing, pressure testing, questioning self-defense as much as martial arts and combat sports, and I'm more of a mission to share these discoveries through pressure testing through the show. The lessons I usually learn are much more from a production perspective and a human perspective. I learn more about relationships. I learn more about the human mind, how people get along, when they do, when they not, when they fall apart under pressure, and how much you can push them until they start to have issues, or also just how to keep people safer. How can I ensure that everyone feels good and everyone has a good time and nobody gets injured? Also, what people are interested in, like what are they fascinated about? How can I deliver the stories that happen in the show and the interactions and the funny moments and the sad moments? How can I really make sure that people get to feel that and experience that as well? Like, what's the best way? So all of that is much more for me of a learning process, and also how to manage. Just, in Season 3, we had over 20 people on the set, including contestants, videographers, photographer, additional staff, attackers, sometimes even extras, and you have to manage all that, and you need to fit it into a schedule, into a realistic schedule. You need to make sure everyone is fed. You need to make sure everyone is not too exhausted and rested enough to continue. Everyone's happy and agrees with the vision and has no internal conflict. There's so much going on. And that's much more of a learning process for me than...
I was going to say, after watching Season 3, I think I messaged you personally after I watched the first episode, because I was like, like the production value is insane. Especially from stepping up from looking back at season 1 in comparison to what you were able to achieve in season 3. I was like this is incredible. The amount of effort and the amount of love that's been poured into the project. I thought it was really cool to see. So just from me to you, honestly, well done, because I thought it was clear how much work had gone into making this, and it was so awesome to be a part of that set, kind of as you'd finished the end of season 3, and I got to kind of see a little bit of the inner workings of how things were put together. It was really cool. Before we kind of sign you out for the day and let you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, I wanted to make a quick note that you obviously...
My busy work.
yeah, same for us too. I was going to mention, obviously, a lot of the self-defense training and stuff that you did was prior to the making of the USDC. Obviously, your experiences were after the video you put up to do with testing your Aikido and beginning to kind of branch out a little bit more. And one of those things was a video that you did with Mr. Peter Constantine, and I thought it's important to bring him up because as of the recording of this, it's probably been a couple of months since he passed away. So I thought I'd just quickly mention that, because obviously I think I've met him, obviously so have you, Rokas, and I think he did a lot of really great things for the self-defense community, especially in the sharing of it. Obviously he wrote multiple books, was a big part of making videos, DVDs, and obviously the amount of seminars and stuff he's done. So I thought it'd be really interesting just to get some last thoughts on how training with people like Peter kind of impacted the way in which you've approached making the USDC.
Yeah, Peter obviously passing away was a big loss, and it was a sad day when I discovered it, and I really appreciate some of the moments we had together. We connected sometimes in between, but I had the pleasure of meeting him and training with him personally twice, and both times he had quite an impact on me. You know, his mindset, it wasn't just the mechanics he uses in fights and the powerful punch he was able to develop, but also just his mindset and how he sees self-defense, the whole legal aspect of it. We spoke quite a bit about him being an expert witness and helping the court system realize whether it was appropriate force or inappropriate force. Like, how do you implement that into your own self-defense practice in terms of considering how do you not only about defending yourself, but also how do you look and appear to other people, because you may defend yourself and end up looking like the bad guy and suffer the consequences for it. So it's one of the big takeaways from our discussions, and also just how far beyond self-defense is beyond just fighting, that there's so many elements to it. So we had some quite significant conversations about that, and it definitely helped me. He definitely helped me shape my understanding and evolve my understanding of self-defense through the meetings we had, because it was also that very crucial stage where I was very much looking for answers and trying to distinguish what makes sense, what does make sense, where does self-defense begin and where does it end. And it was definitely one of those very impactful people in my journey.
Yeah, I think there's a hell of a lot of people like yourself who, he impacted in that way, me included. Obviously, the organisation that I'm with, the British Combat and Karate Association, Peter Constantine was the head of that. So a lot of his teachings trickle down into a lot of the clubs in which I affiliate with on a regular basis, including people like Ian Abernethy, who was obviously a main student of his for a long period of time. So, I think we're going to have to call it there. I think if we go any longer, we're just going to keep talking, which is obviously great. I don't mind doing that. But before we go, number one thing I want to know, Rokas, is where can we find you and how can we consume all of your content?
So the main source of content for me is YouTube. I run the channel called USDC by Rokas Leo. USDC also happens to be a cryptocurrency, but I'm trying to make USDC the show bigger than it is. But if you type in Rokas Leo, you'll definitely find the channel. You can also go to usdchampionship.com. That's the official website of the championship, and there you can find all the episodes one by one. Sometimes YouTube is a little bit confusing. It's not always good for series and following along, although there are playlists. But if you go to usdchampionship.com, you'll find all the information. There's also the information about the retreat. Well, now they're going to be happening very soon, so probably too late for that. But again, women's one is coming, and I don't want to say too much, but it's very likely I will also do some retreats in other countries, more accessible to more people in the future. So yeah, whoever wants to have a USDC experience, it's going to be possible. So yep, that's more or less it.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Rokas. Jack, as always, where can we find you? Where can we find the club?
You can find me at cotswolddkarateschool.com, or you can find me on our Instagram page, which is obviously Cotswold Karate School 2. Have a look for us there.
Excellent. You can find me on Instagram at Good Medicine Martial Artist. Please get involved with the Armchair Combatives official podcast Instagram. As always, like, comment, and subscribe as often as possible with your chosen podcast platform of preference. Any interaction is good interaction. It drives us up the charts. It means that we can reach out to a wider audience and get more incredible creators like Rokas on to discuss the topics you want to hear about. For the sake of argument, any comments today would be excellent to hear. Who was your favourite USDC contestant and why? I'm sure Rokas would love the feedback just as much as we would. But other than that, we've been Jack and Pat. This has been the Armchair Combatives podcast. A big thank you again to Mr. Rokas Leo, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.